Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Gittin Daf Yud and we're starting with the Brisa, 3/4 of the way from the bottom on Yud Beis Amud Beis. And this Gemara is really a parallel Marimakom in the Tanaim from our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, we were having a conversation about whether or not one could be choser on a get isha and a shtar shiur, and there was a machloket if you were allowed to do that. According to one shita in the Mishnah, you were allowed to be choser, and according to another shita, it depends. In one case, you were allowed, in the case of get isha, but not by the shtar shiur, and that is what we're going to get into today. Tanya, the Gemara has a brisa. Amar Rebbe Lazar. Rebbe Lazar says, Amarnu lo lemeir. You can imagine anyone who's calling Reb Meir Meir must have been a peer at a younger age. This is not yet at the part of his life when Reb Meir was the Reb Meir. I would imagine that no one would have ever done this unless it was a dear friend. Amarnu lo lemeir, we said to him, I don't understand your shita. V'halo, while it may be the case that you hold that there's a chov for an evet to be yotze mitachas rabo, really, it's a zchus hu le'eved she yotze mitachas yedei rabo lecheres. It's a good thing for him. We should allow him to go free. Amar lanu, Rav Meir said back to us, says Rebbe Lazar, really chovulo, really it's bad for him to go free. Sheim haya eved kohen, had he been the eved of a kohen, poslo min hatruma. There is a detriment to going free, and that is that if an eved works for a kohen, he then will lose out on his truma if he goes free. So that's considered a negative to go free. Amarnu lo, we said back to Rav Meir, wait 1 second. V'halo ma'im yirtze shelo lazuno v'shelo lefarnaso rishoy. We learned yesterday, at least according to some shitas, that you're able to not feed him and not to give him any money. So you can do that while you still keep him. What does that have to do with? You can't argue that it's a chov to lose truma when even while he's your ebed, you can say, I never want to feed you. So says the Gemara, Amar lanu, he says, wait, there is, says Rav Meir, there is a scenario where there's a categorical chov for him to be freed. What's that? Umayilu eved kohen shabarach ve'eshes kohen shamar da'al baila. If you have an eved of a kohen that ran away, or the wife of a kohen who rebelled against her husband, hello, much as they may not have a good relationship, but for as much as they're still connected, as much as the eved is still an eved, and the isha is still an isha, hello ochlin b'truma, they still get to benefit from truma. But once this eved has been freed, so then he can no longer benefit from the truma, and because that's the case, it's considered a chov. And then this next line is actually attributed to the sheet of the Chachamim and not Rav Meir. And the Gemara says, Aval isha chov hu la shekain pasla mina truma mafsida mina mezonos. We're not going to spend time on this line now, but we will translate it. That in regards to an isha, for her to be away from her husband, for her to be divorced, is considered a chov. It's considered to be detrimental, because she is passled from truma when she gets divorced, and she loses out on food that she's otherwise guaranteed in her ksuba. So now, ignoring that last line and going back to the banter between Rebbe Lazar and Rav Meir, really it's Rebbe Lazar telling a story about what they said to Rav Meir. The Gemara says, I want to try and understand a little bit better what the underpinning of that conversation really was. We're 4 lines from the bottom on Yud Beis Amud Beis. The Gemara says, Mai ka'amrule, umai ka'mehadar lehu. What was Rav Meir saying? What were they saying to Rav Meir, and what did he say back to them? So the Gemara says, Hachi ka'amar lehu. This is what Rav Meir was saying to them. Hishavtuni ala mezonos. I understand what you're saying about food, because you argued that you're right. You're right. I am not obligated to feed my slave. But my tishivuni ala truma. But what will you say about the truma? And if you want to say that then maybe I can throw a get at the eved and it'll get within his dalet amos and then he'll be all done. That's true. But if he knows that's coming, then shavikle, he'll leave the arik ve'azil alma. He'll run away, and then he'll always officially be my eved, and he'll always have access to food, which means that for him to be divorced from the Rab is considered to be detrimental. Uma'ilu, says the Gemara on the top of Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, Uma'ilu eved kohen shabarach ve'eshes kohen shamar da'al baila. But in a case where the eved of a kohen ran away, or the wife of a kohen was rebellious, halo ochlin b'truma, for as long as they're still halachically tethered to one another, it just means that they're not living together anymore, but they're still married. So in that case, they're still, it's in our parlance. Yeah, they're separated. I don't know exactly what that means in halachic terms. Let me see if Rashi defined it on the previous page. Yeah, he doesn't. But it just means that they're still married but not together. correct? Separated is a more appropriate word. So they're still, for as long as they're halachically connected to one another. So then if that's the case, then halo ochlim b'truma, v'zeh eno yachol, but an eved who is broken off from his master is not able. And therefore the Gemara says that what Rav Meir's, the gist of Shitas Rav Meir was very simply that it's a chov for an eved to be broken off from his master, because at the end of the day, he will end up losing out on food.
No, it's not just separated. It's separated and she's gone.
She's not divorceable because she's out of reach. Correct. Similar to the eved who ran away. But the language of the Gemara was a little different. I mean, Michael's right to call that out. It doesn't say barach. It just says that she's marda. Marda, Meredis, what did it say?
Because it's used the word married in other connotations in previous Gemaras.
I don't know what you're referring to, but yeah. So the Gemara does say that Rav Meir makes this point very, very nice and clear, that at the end of the day, it seems that there's a chov for the eved to go free, because while the eved is still connected to his Rav, when he's still an eved, he'll always have access to certain things. And if that's true, then for him to lose access is considered a chov. So the Gemara says in regards to Rav Meir's approach, Shapir Kamar Luhu, Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, 3 lines down. Wow, Rav Meir has a great argument. Amar Rava, Hainu de Kamahadre Lebemasnis, and this is actually what the Mishnah meant with its next line when it says, Mibnei Shehu Kinyano, that the Eved is really a possession of the Rab. The Ibai Shakil Arba Zuze me Yisrael, that if he wanted, he could have taken 4 zuz of a Yisrael, Upasile Kol Hecha de Ise, and he could have just divorced him in any way he wanted. In other words, let's say that this guy is a Kohen and he has an Eved. His Eved has run away, and the Eved says, here's my documentation. I'm still the Eved of Mr. Kohen. Give me Truma, and he'd be right to say so. So now what can happen is that the Kohen can say to a Yisrael, I'm going to make a deal with you. I'm going to sell you my Eved at only 4 zuz. That is a very, very low price. But I don't know if he's ever going to show up. If he does, you got a great deal. If he doesn't, then you've lost 4 zuz. That's to the benefit of the Kohen, because now he's offloaded this Eved from accessing Truma. And the Gemara says that that's a reasonable recommendation.
And so what happens if that Eved does eat the Truma?
That's usher. He's not allowed to. He's a czar now. He's not allowed to eat that. That's like a divorced wife eating Truma. This guy, you're correct that it's not clear as to how he would know. Today, in an automated system, the guy would scan his driver's license and they would say, oh, it seems to be that your master has divorced you and you just don't know it yet. But you're right, there would be errors today because of the slow-moving communication. You're 100% correct. And that may raise a shaila on the other end. Are you allowed to create a divorce of an Eved where in the end he's likely to eat Truma because you haven't told him that he's divorced yet? Could be lifnei aver, right? Even though you have every right to divorce your Eved. And maybe it's not lifnei aver, maybe it's misayeh ledvar aver, which is one step removed. Okay. So the Gemara says, what was Rav Meir's whole argument? Rav Meir's whole argument is that maybe the Eved belongs to a Kohen, and if he runs away, he can always milk the system and get Truma. So it says the Gemara, Ula Rav Meir, Teinach Eved Kohen. I understand how you can say that it's a chov, that it's to the detriment of the Eved if he gets divorced from his Rav, if the Rav is a Kohen. But Eved Yisrael, ma'ika lemeimar. But if the Eved is a Yisrael, so then how do you establish that it's negative for him to be divorced? You can't use your Truma argument because if he's the Eved of a Yisrael, there's no Truma to be had. So the Gemara says, Amar Reb Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak mipnei shemafsido mishivcha kanainis. What's happening is that when he gets freed, he no longer has access to a shivcha kanainis. When he's an Eved Kanani, he can sleep with a shivcha kananis. But when he's freed, then he's Jewish and he can only be together with a Yiddish maidel. So it says the Gemara, what are you talking about? Shemaf sida mishivcha kanainis. Adarabba, when you free him, harehu matir bevaschorin. You're not cohabiting with another slave. You have a chashuba Jewish woman. You're a fully Jewish person now that you're freed. So why is that considered a chov? Says the Gemara, Avda, when you're an Eved, when you have the mindset of an Eved, not just in profession, when you have the mindset of an Eved, you're a lowly person. And therefore, behefkera nichale, he prefers hefkerus. He prefers hefkerus. The average age of marriage in America is creeping higher every single year. People prefer hefkerus. And the Gemara says, zilale, shchichale, pritale. They're available to him. They're zilale. They're inexpensive, and they're pritale. And the Gemara basically says it's considered a chov because while he's an Eved Kanani, he would much prefer to be with a shivcha kanaanis because it's more hefker, which is what he prefers, than it is to be in a monogamous relationship with a Jewish woman. That's what the Gemara says. New Mishnah. The Mishnah is about halfway down in Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. This Mishnah we've seen earlier quoted out of context. This is where it actually belongs, and then we'll be getting into the great sugya of Maimed Shlashtam, which we'll discuss in a little bit. The Mishnah opens, Ha'omer Tnu get, really the word zeh should not be there. I'll explain why. Tnu get le'ishti, if a man says, give a get to my wife, and shtar shichror le'avdi, and give this document to free my slave, give it to my eved, and umeis, the person who said this, he died right away, lo yitnu la'achar misa. The halacha is that only with his verbal comment, that is insufficient, and no shtar will be given over. Now, the reason why I can't say zeh is because it implies that the get is already in existence. Give this document. If the get was in existence already, then we would say that. That's why some of the Rishonim here pull out the words zeh. That's part one of the Mishnah. Part two of the Mishnah, which is what we're going to be spending some time on. Tunu mana leish ploni umeis. If a person says, give money to this particular person and then he dies, yitnu la'achar misa. Then even after he dies, we do then give over the money to said person, whoever he said to give the money to. So Ruvain says, please give $100 to Shimon, and then right away Ruvain passes away. The halacha is that the money transfers hands. And the Gemara opens, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta mishmei de Rab. When do we say that in the second case of the Mishnah of Tnuman leish ploni umeis yitnu la'achar misa, that's if the money is set aside in the corner. So Ruvain says, I would like you to give money to Shimon, give $100 to Shimon, and Ruvain subsequently dies before the transfer of the money. So the halacha is, as long as the money is not only earmarked in dollar amount, but literally set aside in a drawer, then that money can be transferred over.
Not just basically if the money is in liquid state in today's terminology.
You need to have your $100 bill that you're talking about set aside. That's what it means. They really didn't have what we have. I mean, they had versions of it, I guess, but what we have is actual digital references to currency. That's what our bank accounts are. There is no collection of funds behind our bank account other than the bank's guarantee that when we want to liquidate our accounts, they'll give us the equivalent in cash. But our money exists in a purely digital form. So the Gemara then says, okay, I got you. You're saying that the Seif of our Mishnah is talking about a case where the money is set aside. B'maya skinan. Let's get a little bit deeper. What are the details of the case? Who was Ruvain? Ruvain was the one who said, I would like to give $100 to Shimon, and then Ruvain died. Was Ruvain sick when he said that, or was Ruvain healthy? That's a machlokes. B'maya skinan. Ilema bibari, if you want to say that when Ruvain said this comment that I'd like to give Shimon money and then he died, if you want to say that Ruvain was healthy, kitzibur en mahave. If he's healthy, then just because the money is set aside doesn't matter. Halo mashach. There was no kinyan that was made. There was no kinyan mashicha that was made. So if Ruvain was healthy, there's no way that this transaction could be accurate. The Mishnah's pashut wrong. It can't be the case that Ruvain said, give Shimon $100. Ruvain dies, the money's sitting in a box. That doesn't work, because if Ruvain was healthy, then the fact that the money's sitting aside is irrelevant. Halo mashach, there was no kinyan. And ve'el b'shchiv meira. And if you want to say that no, Ruvain was on his deathbed, and when a person is on their deathbed, they're given they're given a tremendous amount of latitude in their comments. My irya tziburin, ki ein tziburin nami. Even had the money not been set aside, had Ruvain been a shchiv meira, had he been on his deathbed, we would have granted his request even without the money being set aside. Why? That when a shchiv meira, a person on his deathbed, says something, it carries a lot more weight. It's as if it's written down, and it's as if it was handed over already. But mimanavshach, either way you cut it, our Mishnah makes no sense. Let's review our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says if Ruvain says to Shimon, I'd like to give Shimon, Ruvain says to someone, I'd like to give $100 to Shimon, and then Ruvain dies, we say that the money goes to Shimon after he dies, as long as the money's earmarked. It says the Gemara, that makes no sense according to either model. If Ruvain was well when he made that comment, he doesn't have the power of a shchiv meira, and the money sitting aside is irrelevant. There's no mashicha. And if you want to say it's a shchiv meira, then I don't need the money to be sitting aside. So which one is it? And the Gemara provides two answers in the form of a machlokas samurai. Amar Rav Zvid, really le'olam bebari. Really what we're talking about is a person who is healthy. Reuven was healthy. If it's healthy, so what was our question about the healthy? That there was no kinyan mashicha. So how is it that we can say that the money will transfer hands? So the Gemara says, Uchad Rav Huna amar Rav. Amar Rav Huna amar Rav. Manali biyadcha. I have money by you. Tenehu lo leploni. Can you please give it to another person who I owe money to? Let's talk about a practical case. If I'm Reuven and you're Shimon, so I borrowed money from Shimon. So let's say, right, if I'm holding your money, so you gave me $100. I have $100 of mine, and I owe you money, and you say to me, Phil, don't pay me back. I owe Levi money. If you're going to give to me, I'm going to give to Levi. Just give it straight to Levi. So that's the transaction. The Gemara says, "B'maimet shlashtan," with all three of them standing together, kana. But only as long as the money is bitziburin. Only if the money is munachas bekeren zavis. Let's review. Rav Zvid's answer is that what's going on in our Mishnah when it says that if Reuven gives money, if Reuven says, I want to give the money to Shimon, therefore, even if Reuven dies, the money goes there, and it has to be only if the money is bitziburin. Says the Gemara, we're talking about a case of maimet shlashtan, and in a case of maimet shlashtan, the money has to be munachas bitziburin, and that is answer number one, an acceptable answer. And 3 lines from the bottom on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, Rav Papa Amar, no, the opposite. La'olam b'shchiv meira. Really, we're talking about a case that when Reuven said that I want to give money to Shimon, and then Reuven died, he is his wish is granted because he's a shchiv meira, and as we said about a shchiv meira, that his words are kiksuvenu b'chimisurin damo. He has a very, very powerful mouth at that point because it's a dying man's wishes, and we do give a lot of credence to that. So says the Gemara, according to Rav Papa, we are dealing with a shchiv meira. If we're dealing with a shchiv meira, why does the money have to be resting munachas bekeren zavis? After all, a shchiv meira is a very powerful comment. Says the Gemara, Uchede the Rav, because of another memra of Rav. What's that? The Gemara says, the Amar Rav, Shchiv meira she'amar tnumana leploni minichsi. If a Shchiv meira says, if Reuven's on his deathbed and he says, please give $100 to Shimon. So, mana zeh, this $100, then yes, no, namely that's munachas bekeren zavis. That's how he explains our Mishnah. But mana stam, but if he just says give any $100 and Reuven's a shchiv meira, that's actually not sufficient. Meaning, Rav is limiting the power of the shchiv meira. A shchiv meira in general is kiksuvin v'chimisurin damo, but only if the money is munachas bekeren zavis. And therefore, if it's mana stam, if Reuven, the shchiv meira, says, I want to give $100 to Shimon, but he doesn't say which $100, then einos, and then why not? Chayshin and shema mana kavur ka'amar. Perhaps we're talking about money that's already accounted for. It's already been earmarked. It's already been dedicated to somebody else. And let's say, just in our parlance, the serial number is on the bill, and it says underneath this serial number really belongs to somebody else. So therefore, whenever it's stam, then we don't accept the shchiv meira's wishes. Now, the Gemara adds in a halachic conclusion to this concern, and that we're actually not concerned about this, but nevertheless, we do have a shita of Rav that will help us to understand how to understand our Mishnah. So Machlokes Rav Zvid, who says that our Mishnah is talking about Maimet Shlashtan, versus the opinion of Rav Papa, who says we're talking about a Shchiv Meira with the limited explanation of a Shchiv Meira according to Rav, and that is that it's only true when there's money munachas bekeren zavis. So the Gemara says on the bottom of Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, why doesn't Rav Papa and Rav Zvid agree with one another? Rav Papa, who took the approach of Shchiv Meira, my taima lo omar ki Rav Zvid. Why doesn't Rav Papa want to learn our Mishnah like Rav Zvid? Rav Zvid was the one who said that our Mishnah is talking about a case of Maimet Shlashtan. Beautiful answer. Because we know that Maimet Shlashtan does work, but only when the money's munachas bekeren zavis. That's a great explanation of our Mishnah. Why was Rav Papa unwilling to listen to the shita of Rav Zvid? So on the top line of Yud Gimel Amud Beis, the Gemara says, Kasava Rav Papa, Ki Amar Rav. When does Rav say that Maimet Shlashtan works? That it seems to be Lo Shna b'malve v'lo Shna b'pikadon. That's true, but that's not true of our Mishnah, because when it comes to a malve, when it comes to a loan, the rules are different than it is with a pikadon. Why? Because when I give you a malve, I'm lending you money. Do you give me back the same bill, the same coins? Of course not. A pikadon is the same coins. I'm asking you, you're now my security deposit box. Please hold this stack of bills. I'm going to pay you to protect these products. Good. So then I always get back the same bills, but a malva is not like that. So that money can't be munachas b'keren zavis, and therefore he disagrees with the shita of Rav Zvid. And Rav Zvid on the second line, my time lo amar ke Rav Papa. Why doesn't Rav Zvid accept the approach of Rav Papa that we're talking about a case of a shchiv meira? So says the Gemara, because Rav Zvid says, lo metukma masnisim b'shchiv meira. He said, I can prove that our Mishnah is not talking about a shchiv meira, that our person in our Mishnah, Ruvain, as we've been discussing, the one who says, I'd like to give you $100 and then he dies, that we still give the money. The Gemara says that Rav Zvid can prove that we don't give that we don't know, that we're not talking about a shchiv meira. Mimai, how does Rav Zvid know that our Mishnah is not talking about a shchiv meira? Says the Gemara Katani, because what does it say? Haomer tenu get zeli ishti ushar shechur zev la'avdi v'meis. If a husband says, give a get to my wife, or give a shtar shechur to my eved, and he dies, what does the Reisha say? The Reisha said, lo yitnu la'achar misa. Now, what is reason number one why the get wasn't given? Taima demes was because he died after he made that comment. What if he didn't die? Hamechayim nosnin. That's reason number one why we don't give it, is because he died. Had he been alive, we would have given the get. And also, Taima de Amar Tenu, also because he said, give her the get. Halo Amar Tenu a nosnin. Had he not said Tenu, he would have just said get zeli ishti, then einos, then we wouldn't have given the get either. Ushchiv meira afal gav delo amar tnu nosnin. Oh, so says the Gemara. Rav Zvid says I can't handle Rav Papa shita, and I know that we're not talking about a shchiv meira, because the shchiv meira, even if he wouldn't say the word tnu, if he would have just said get li ishti, that would have been sufficient, and therefore our Mishnah, by definition, cannot be talking about a shchiv meira. Ditnan. How do we know that a shchiv meira is so powerful in his words that even if he doesn't say tnu, he only says get li ishti, that will bring about an actual divorce? The Gemara says a quarter of the way down in Yud Gimel Amud Beis, we'll be going to the top of Yud Dalet Amud Aleph, about 6-7 lines down. The Gemara says over here, B'Rishona hayu omrim hayotze bekolar, a man who's being brought out in chains to his death, presumably. The Omar kisvu get li ishti, all he said was write my wife a get. He didn't say hand my wife a get. So how do we follow those instructions if all he says was kisvu? Hare'elu yichtavu ve'yitnu. We do both. We make the assumption that he really wanted both things to happen. Chazru lomar, they even added to that, af ha'mefaresh v'hayotze b'shayara. We even would allow for this leniency of a man who is going away for a long time on a boat, on a ship. Last minute he was whisked away, and as he was boarding the Titanic, he says, write my wife again. And he didn't say yitnu. There too we do both. And here's our line. Reb Shimon Shazuri Omer af ha-mesukan. Even in the case of a mesukan, someone who's deathly ill, even though he didn't say yitnu, he just said kisvu. The halacha is that we still can give a get, even though it doesn't say yitnu in regards to a mesukan, which is a shchiv meira. The haraya that Rav Zvid does not accept Rav Papa, because our Mishnah cannot be talking about a shchiv meira, because the shchiv meira doesn't need to say tnu. But in our Mishnah, it seems that you needed to say tnu. The Gemara asks on this a very brief question and says, that's great and all, but that's assuming that we hold like Rav Shimon Shazuri. Rav Zvid's shita is great, because he disagrees with Rav Papa for a very good reason, but his very good reason is rooted in Rav Shimon Shazuri. So the Gemara says the third of the way down, Maski Flora Vashi, Uman Nemalan Demasnisa Rav Shimon Shazuri. Who says that we paskin like Rav Shimon Shazuri? Maybe the din is that a shchiv meira needs to say tenu in order to bring out the effect of a get. Dilma Rabbanan, perhaps we hold like the Rabbanan who don't say such a strict line with the shchiv meira that you don't have to say. Maybe you do have to say tenu, and therefore we have no raya from our Mishnah one way or the other. And that ends this part of the sugya, which is the machlokes Rav Papa and Rav Zvid. For the rest of the day today, we're going to be discussing Maimed Shlashtan. So I'd just like to review Maimed Shlashtan one more time. This transaction where the three of us are in a room. It's an efficiency. I owe money to, I borrowed money from you. So I have $1,000 of yours in my hand. So let's say Michael, I borrowed $1,000 from Michael. I owe Michael money, but Michael owes Mr. Shiur money. So we're all three of us. He's like, Phil, just give the money directly to Mr. Shiur. And just skip a step. Good, right? The straightest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Let's just get it done. That's called Maimat Shlashtan, and that is kana. Even without a kinyan action, it's still considered viable. So let's analyze this. Gufa, we had said on the previous page, Amar Rav Huna Amar Rab, that mana li biyadcha, that if I have $100 of yours, or if you have $100 of mine, I should say, Tanei lo leploni. So if I owe Michael money and Michael owes Mr. Shiur money, so then I'm just going to give the money straight to Mr. Shiur. We said b'maimat shlashtan, with all three of them together, the halacha is kana. And says the Gemara, Amar Rava, mistabra milse de Rab bipikadon. I understand, and it makes sense to me, this shita of Rab that Maimat Shlashtan works when it's bipikadon, because that's munachas bekaren zavis. That's when it's the same exact dollars. Those are the parameters when Maimat Shlashtan works. Maimat Shlashtan isn't stam. It's that the money that I have is a pikadon. So really what happened is that Michael gave me money as a pikadon. And instead of me paying him back, I'm just going to pay Mr. Shiur. It's a pikadon. Makes sense by a pikadon. Aval b'mil v'lo. But it seems to be that with a loan, that would not work, because when I give you a loan, you spend those dollars and pay me back with different dollars. So therefore, that's not munachas bekaren zavis like we saw on the previous page. So Rava's starting assumption in this sugya is that it only works by a pikadon because it's the same dollars, munachas bekaren zavis, but it doesn't work in regards to a loan. Says the Gemara, what are you talking about? A lashon of shvua. That's just not correct. Amar Rav afilu b'milveh. Rav has a huge chiddush that Maimat Shlashtan works even though the dollars are not munachas bekaren zavis, which is what we said on the previous page. And it marnami, we have this in another statement in the Amoraim, Shmuel Amar Shmuel Mishmei de Levi, milvali biyadcha. It's even a loan. Tanelo the plani b'Maimat Shlashtan kana the time of mine. Why is it that this would work? Let's review the question. We had learned on Yud Gimel Amid Aleph that Maimat Shlashtan works when the money is munachas bekaren zavis. So if I am really supposed to pay back Michael, and Michael owes money to Mr. Shiur, let's be efficient, and I'll just give the money to Mr. Shiur. That's all great and good. And by a pikadon, we understand that because I was holding on to something that was Michael's, and it's the same something. He gave me a stack of bills, and it's the same exact serial numbers on the bills. I'm just holding it. I'm a security deposit box. So then I give it to Mr. Shiur. That's Maimat Shlashtan kana. The chiddush of Rav is that it applies even by a loan. Why does it apply even by a loan when what I'm returning was not munachas bekaren zavis? I spent that money 10 times over. I'm giving you back different dollars. So says the Gemara, answer number one, Amar Ameimar, Naaseh Omer lo. It's as if we said to one another, B'shas matan mos, Sha'abadna lach ledidach, u'lechol de'asu machmasach. I will pay back this money to anyone who you want, even if it's not the same dollars. It's as if we said that. It's a built-in agreement. Amar le Rav Ashi la Ameimar, I don't agree with you. Why? 5 lines from the bottom. Elamayata, if what you're saying is true that Maimat Shlashtan always works under all of these circumstances, I can find a case where Maimat Shlashtan seemingly won't work. If what you're saying is that it's as if we agreed to one another from the beginning that whoever are the people to whom you owe money, I can pay them. Well, what if one of them wasn't born when that happened? I borrowed money from you 10 years ago. Now there's a 9-year-old child to whom you owe money. That could not possibly have been in my mind. So there's no way that if the rationale behind Maimat Shlashtan is that it's as if we made this deal on day one, that wouldn't apply to people who were born after that day. And says the Gemara, the lo habu b'shas matan mos hachanami the lo kano. It should be that the Maimat Shlashtan should not work. De afilu leRab Meir de Amar Adam makna davar shelo bala olam. When even according to Rav Meir, who says that there is a kinyan even for something that isn't in the world, hani mili the davar sheyeshno ba'olam aval the davar she'eino ba'olam lo. What's the case that we're talking about? If there's a tree and the tree has yet to bear fruits, okay, but at least the tree was in the world. But this child wasn't in the world. The haraya, we can see from here clearly that Maimat Shlashtan won't work in this case. And we need Maimat Shlashtan to work across the boards. Therefore, answer number one is tested and rejected. It is not ke'omer lo b'shas matan mos that anyone who you owe money to, I can pay directly. So the Gemara says on the very bottom line of Yud Gimel Amud Beis, Ella Amar Rav Ashi. Really, what are we talking about? Why is it that Maimat Shlashtan works even in a case of a halva, says the Gemara, the Kamishtanyale ben Malva Yeshanale Malva Chadasha Gomar Umeshabed Nafshe. Says the Gemara, it's a very difficult answer. Seemingly, the Gemara says that it's satisfying to, in this case, Michael, to have a change of where the money is resting. So now Michael's going to give that money over to somebody else because there is this transaction. It works out nicely. Let's take a look at Rashi. Be'ahi hana de Kamishtanya. Hi milve lagabe hi milve yeshana milve chadasha. Now the malve is changing, so therefore v'noach lo lidchos hapiron zman aruch, because there's some benefit in pushing off repayments. Therefore, Maimad Shlashtan works. Amar le huna mar bereder Rav Nechemia the Rav Ashi elameata. If that's true, what about a case where people want you to pay back right away and there is no zman aruch? Says the Gemara, Kagon hani debei bar el yashiv de kafti v'shakli la'alter. These guys are the mafioso. They tie you down and they beat you until you pay them back. So there is no noach. That's what Rashi says over here. But there is no v'noach lo lidchos hapiron zman aruch. You have to pay back right away. Hachanami de lo kanu. There, then Maimon Shlashtan won't work because the payback is, so then it depends how quick the payback is, or if you live in the city of the mafia where they force you to pay back. If you want to say that that's true, imkain nasata divarecha l'shiurin. If so, then we're dealing with a case scenario of nasata divarecha l'shiurin. Literally, it means you've given your words different measurements. In other words, it seems to be that it would be unclear as to when Maimon Shlashtan would work. If you live in a city where they force you to pay in 5 days. So then there's no Maimon Shlashtan, but 6 days is too confusing. And the Gemara says it therefore can't be that way. Ella, the Gemara comes up with a very, 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 very unique conclusion. The Gemara says, why does Maimon Shlashtan work? There is no reason. Says the Gemara, 6 lines down in Yodalad Amud Aleph, Ella Amar Mar Zutra, Hani Tlas Mili, Shavinhu Rabbanan Kehilchasa, below Taima. There are 3 laws that the rabbis instituted that don't have a perfect reason behind them. Now, let's just be clear. There's a rationale as to why we do Maimon Shlashtan. But the reason why Maimon Shlashtan works everywhere, under all circumstances, that's not clear. That part we don't know. And we treated Maimon Shlashtan as something that works across the boards as an unknown reason. Chada ha. The first of these 3 things that is Hilchasa below Taima is Maimon Shlashtan. The second one is the following case. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Hakosev kol nechasav liishto. If a man gives over all of his property to his wife, lo asa ela apitropia. She's nothing more than the controller. She gets to oversee, but the money is not all hers. She has other obligations. She can't keep it for herself. So there's still Yerusha issues and Nachala issues. The monies are not totally hers. That's din number 2.
And she has nothing left if she divorces her.
Not that she has nothing left. Rashi, look at Rashi 7 lines down, apotropia. Rashi says lahachnisu lahotzi, that she has to be the one, she gets to basically watch over the budget. V'afal pisha kasvula belashon matana, even though the husband gave it over to her belashon matana, lo kina asan, she doesn't fully get it. It's not fully hers. Why? Ve'ein tam bedavar. Elakach tiknu, hefker bezdin hefker. This requires a lot of rishonim. With this, we would need to spend time. What?
So that also does her super like any other.
What would end up happening is that if there are no children, so then she could keep all the money. But if there are nachla issues, then she has to pay out the nachla. She has to pay the kids. If there are creditors and debtors, she's got to pay them. She's got to pay them. Whatever's left over, she can keep.
Not trouble. She can blow through it however she likes. Right? When she dies, it goes back to his back. If there's anything left.
Yeah, again, we'd have to drill down and figure out here because this.
Where's that patrol?
Correct. No, Rashi says lahachnis or lahotzi.
Right.
It's just that she's the controller. She just
controller.
Yeah, that's all she does.
Make decisions, you know.
Within limits. She can't liquidate because she has obligations.
It's based in on behalf of the Solomon, who obviously don't get to keep that. I don't know.
Don't know.
It's not clear, right?
Not from here. No.
What that means.
And last but not least is a very unique din, which again we don't have time for this. V'idach the Amar of Chananya, Hamasi Isha Livno Gadol Bebayis. If an oldest son gets married in a house, Kinao, the son will be Kona, that house. Rashi, Bebayis, 10 lines down. Bayis miyuchad she'eno darbo ela asalo lebeis chasnus. It was a house that was made for the sake of the groom. If they get married in that house, then halacha lemaisa, the house then belongs to the groom. Not bad. If you have enough money to build a house for your groom's party, you can probably let him keep the house anyways. We're going to stop right here at Amar Le. We'll pick up Emir Hashem tomorrow night. Reminder again that tomorrow we're together. Wednesday we're not in person, but we'll record. Wishing you all a beautiful night.